some of this now, more with football finance expert Kieran Maguire and also Max Hayes from the Forest podcast, Garibaldi Red. Hello, Max.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming in. Well, let's actually start with... And hi, Kieran.
Hi, Claire.
Hi. Max, let's start with you then. Your reaction to the deduction.
Yeah, disappointing. A sense of relief, I guess you could say. It's gone on for so long now, this whole points deduction news. I must wonder what Everton fans were going through given their points deduction and how long that's dragged on and still going on now. But for Forest, this has been news that the fans have been expecting, the club's been expecting, and it is disappointing no matter how many points you are deducted. However, a sense of relief, 4 isn't that bad when you think about it and look on paper. But look, any points deduction, of course, is going to affect the players, morale, and of course, Nuno Espirito Santo, the Forest manager, and Forest are on a poor run at the minute. So we need points, and points being taken off us isn't a good thing at all.
You can appeal, so you have 7 days to appeal. But if that isn't successful, what are your thoughts?
I think Forest are in real danger of relegation. I'd even argue that Forest are in danger of going down if there wasn't a points deduction here. We've seen recent performances. They haven't been great from Forest. We're playing, no disrespect to them, but relegation rivals Luton at the weekend. And it wasn't a great performance. There wasn't a lot of fight, desire, spirit from the side. Since Nuno's come in and replaced a fan's favourite manager in Steve Cooper, it hasn't gone brilliantly, apart from the first few games against Man U and Newcastle, almost a new manager bounce. That worked. Since then, it hasn't. Forest, as you say, will probably appeal. I've just read the club statement that the club have just put out. It's very lengthy, and it's very kind of firing back at the Premier League. So I'd expect them to appeal, but this is going to be dragged out. This is going to go on for a while now, possibly till the end of the season, if not after. So Forest could be relegated, then unrelegated from this situation. For me, if I was at the club, I'd be looking to put this to bed, accept the 4 points. We have broken the rules, and we move on.
Kieran, come in on this. I mean, it's a bit of a fiasco, isn't it, really? If you could have a situation where Forest could be relegated, then the appeal takes a bit longer and then they win it and then they could come back up again. It doesn't just affect Forest, it affects other teams as well, doesn't it?
That's right. And it also impacts upon the planning, not just at Forest, but also for those other clubs, because you go into a match at the weekend, you don't know whether a draw or a victory is what you need, and that impacts upon the fans. It affects the manager, the coach, the players, and everybody at the club. And also, we could have this farcical situation whereby we know that the last day of the season is a very emotional one. Do you know whether you're relegated or not? And that has huge implications, not just for the football club per se, but also for all the people that are employed there, because normally clubs that go down have to shed staff.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the reason that was given. Losses in the 2022-23 season breached the threshold of 61 million by 34.5 million. So could you argue that they only have themselves to blame? That's a pretty hefty sum.
It is, but at the same time, Forest were having to operate with one hand held behind their back, because they were allowed to lose only £61 million over 3 years because they'd just been promoted from the Championship, whereas other established clubs in the Premier League, the likes of, say, Palace or Brighton and so on, they could lose 105. So it does seem harsh. You know, if Forest had been allowed to lose 105, they would have been just within the allowable limit, and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Why is there a differential on those figures?
Well, the reason for that is that if clubs have been in the Championship, they're only allowed to lose £13 million each year. And if they've been in the Premier League, they're allowed to lose £35 million. So in the case of Forest, it was 35 plus 2 13s, which gave them a loss of 61 million, which was their target. That does seem harsh for any club that's just been promoted from the Premier League. First of all, it's a great achievement to get promoted, but it's even bigger achievement to stay there. And if you're having to do that with a financial imbalance, it does seem somewhat incongruous.
Max, let's get your view on that. I mean, they knew what the figures were, I guess. It's not easy when you've come up from the Championship to the Premier League, but you know what the figures are. Is there any excuse for kind of wildly going beyond them.
Yeah, I mean, Forest argued mitigation with Brennan Johnson, which, to be fair, the Premier League took into consideration. That was the sale of Brennan Johnson not being sooner the club delayed to allow basically more funds in. They have taken 2 points off for that, but you can argue that any team that spends as much money as Forest did in the summer when they got promoted, they made 30 signings. If a team's going to make 30 signings, you're going to be expected to make a huge loss. And that's how Forest have found themselves in this trouble, as you mentioned there, Claire. And also, I think the problem is Premier League clubs have to compete, and we see the difference of a gulf of quality between the top 10 and the lower half of the league. Forest are in that lower half of the league at the minute, near the bottom. So in order to compete against the likes of even the top 6, you look at Man City, Man United, Arsenal, even teams like Brighton now and Newcastle that are pushing towards those European places, Forest have to spend money. So you can see both sides of the argument. Given that, though, the owners know the rules. This is an ownership that's come from Greece. They've been involved in football for a long time. They knew the rules when they took over Forest and came to England and bought Forest. They've broken them. They have to admit they've broken them. It's just whether there's kind of that mitigation and whether it's justifiable, really.
Kieran, final point to you then. The Premier League is, as Max has just so articulately put it, it's not really a level playing field, is it? Because you've got, this is the whole argument for a Super League, that there are clubs that just have untold sums of money, and you've got clubs that continually come up and down from the league below, and they can't really compete. And I suppose, as you say, there's a difference in the figures that you're allowed to lose depending on how long you've been in the Premier League. But considering what's going on here, do you think the rules need looking at again?
Yes, I think we're almost certain to change to a wage cap from the summer of 2024. Unfortunately, that will just reinforce the existing imbalances within the game, because you can have a club such as Manchester City, which generates 700 million a year, which can spend 70% of its income, so it can spend 490 million pounds on wages, and a club such as Forest, perhaps generating 200 million, which can only spend 140 million on wages. So we're not going to have better rules, we're just going to have different ones.
Good to have you both here. Thanks for coming in the studio, Max.
Appreciate
Good to see
it.
you. Max Hayes there. If you want to catch him, he's on the Forest podcast. Garibaldi read, and football finance expert Kieran Maguire. Thanks for joining us. And I think you were saying, Max, there was a massive statement